What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo with Mike Golick Jr. That's still me. With me, as always, with a considerable chip on his shoulder, Brandon Newman. Brandon, what's going on?
Nothing much, Mike. Just got done watching the Giants do what we knew they were going to do against the Cooper Rush-led Dallas Cowboys. Let's go!
You mean watch them lose?
Do what I thought they were going to do. Yeah, yesterday's podcast, I said that the Eagles would be the only NFC team that was undefeated because the Giants were still hanging around, and we knew how that was going to end.
Well, if you listen to yesterday's podcast, you may not need this advice, but just in case, we always appreciate if you download, subscribe, rate, and review GoJo wherever you get your podcast. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review if this is your first time. Check out the DraftKings YouTube channel with the GoJo with Mike Golick Jr. playlist on there as well. And yes, Brandon, you are correct. The New York Giants, and really I should say the Dallas Cowboys, saved us from having to have a really awkward conversation about a 3-0 New York Giants team and their legitimacy in ways that would not have been warranted. It would have felt an awful lot like Iowa football in 2021, when at one point in the year they were the second-ranked team in the country, and we all knew good and damn well that was not the second-best team in college football. And so, thankfully, cooler heads prevailed on this one. And now, to your point about the Eagles and the Miami Dolphins are the only remaining undefeated teams in the NFL. Just like I think everyone would have probably predicted for the Eagles, but not the Dolphins.
No, but I think the 2-9 people definitely were hedging that way. All they were hoping for this result, but who could have thought? Who could have thunk it?
Yeah, no, trying to get inside the minds of 2-9, not something that we're going to do around here. Even though this is a podcast where at least one of the hosts said that Miami looks like a playoff team very early on in this season, and certainly stand by that now. We have an awesome show today. We promised you some college football on Tuesdays, as we usually get to, so ACC Network and ESPN football analyst Roddy Jones is going to stop by, proud Georgia Tech alum. Going to talk about everyone wanting Deion Sanders to be the name in front of the Georgia Tech job that just opened up recently. Clemson and Michigan both looking a little bit struggly against their opponents this weekend in college football, and how we think that plays out down the stretch of the season. And, of course, etiquette when going to a county fair, because I caught Rowdy right before he was getting ready to take his family to the fair. And you got to have a plan of attack going into those places, Brandon, because they're big, they offer you a lot, and if you don't, it's like a Target. You'll go in and spend $200 without even thinking what's going on.
Absolutely. It's like a good food truck fair. You got to spend $75 per food truck, or else you're not trying the things. Mike, what is a good state fair memory for you?
So in Connecticut, and really the East Coast in general, there's this big fair called the Big E that goes on every year, and it travels up and down around the East Coast, and there's usually concerts associated with it. It brings a lot of different regional staples as far as food and brings them all to one spot in addition to the normal fried stuff. You can go see farms, farm stuff, tractors, animals that you can pet and stuff like that. So I would say that's up there. And then for me, my family, we lived in Avon, Connecticut growing up. There's a town called Simsbury next to us that used to have a county fair every year, or a town fair every year. And this was, I'm talking like 3 or 4 years ago when me and my family would go. So me and my brother and sister are all grown. And we would go, and they would have a bingo tent set up. And it's, $1 a card bingo for babies and old people. And we're posted up at a table in there, absolutely ruining everyone else's time. One, because we were fucking winning. Like it was going out of style. Like it was on sale and we were the only ones that got the message. But we were also letting everybody know it. I'm out here salt bang the little markers onto my desk. We're slamming the table as each of us win. And we're winning a lot. So I'm surprised we didn't get thrown out of there. But we definitely set a tempo that very few other people matched.
No, I appreciate that. Obviously, this isn't obvious. I say it obviously, but around Louisville, Kentucky, there's a lot of church picnics that happen in the summer. But there's obviously that one big state fair. That's that big thing. That's why I first developed my fear of goats, because my friend Taylor almost got eaten by a goat in our state fair a couple, when we were in elementary school. Dead eyes, those goats. I can't stand them. Really the mark of the devil. But anyways, outside of that, and eating deep fried Oreos and things like that. Like that's my State Fair thing. Jack Harlow on his album, he's got a song called State Fair. It just lets me know that the State Fair is very important to everyone who ever grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. But at what age did you know the difference between a Manhattan lobster roll and a Connecticut lobster roll?
A Manhattan lobster roll.
Isn't that the two? Isn't that the two?
Well, I mean, it's usually Maine lobster is the one that everyone associates with.
Okay, no, okay. One's warm and one's cold.
Oh, I honestly, a lot of those like small differences still sort of evade me. I just eat the food. I'm still kind of my dad in that way, and have probably become more of my dad, where I'm less picky about what goes in or the difference. I'm a bad guy to ask for restaurant recommendations too. Like, shout out to Andy Staples, who's come on the podcast. When I landed in Norman, Oklahoma this past weekend and tweeted about a restaurant I was going to, I got a text from Andy with 3 or 4 places to check out while I was there, because he's done a great job, in addition to covering college football, of also cataloging great eats across the country. I'm terrible at that stuff. I see something I appreciate. I usually ask what the best thing that someone does at a particular restaurant is. I eat that, and then I go, okay, that was good or that was bad. It's kind of like movies with me, to where it's more of a binary than it's some long, drawn-out check sheet of how I enjoy this. It's just, does this elicit a good feeling? Whether that's a yum, whether that's some tears, whether that's a, oh my God, anything like that. That's kind of my barometer for success.
Yeah, does this emote, does this food drive me to emote? Yes, and okay, and I did set you up incorrectly, because it's Maine and Connecticut, and I should have known, because who I was talking to, that Connecticut one is the one that's warmed up, dripped in butter, and served on a nice soft brioche roll. So I
will say I've had Connecticut lobster just because there was a food hall near my house in Connecticut. I would go there, and they had a bunch of different kind of food in there. There was Caribbean food. There was, different varieties of Hispanic flavor. And then they had one sign that said New England style barbecue. And I can tell you one restaurant that I never even thought of eating at was whatever New England style barbecue was. Absolutely the fuck not.
Barbecued clams, like
I think that's just code word for meat that would get roasted on the internet if it were to be pictured and put there.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, like, we're trying over here. Come give us a shot.
Yeah. Hey, E for effort and for quality. So shout out to fairs, though. Big fan of fairs. Went to the Texas State Fair and saw a giant cartoon spray paint drawing of Nicolas Cage's character from Con Air in the jeans and the white tank top undershirt that has a problematic name.
Yes.
So, core memory from the Texas State Fair before the Texas and Oklahoma game, which is going to have considerably less juice this year. And Brandon, speaking of football games that lack juice, we talked a little bit about it. Monday Night Football did happen last night, and sweet Jesus, was that 3.5 quarters of thorough ass. The Cowboys win 23-16 in a game that largely featured handoffs and incompletions until somewhere towards the end of the third quarter, when the Giants finally went on and scored a touchdown. Saquon Barkley had one of those he's back 36-yard touchdown runs that, by the way, did cash a DraftKings boost on the DraftKings Sportsbook app that boosted profit for either running back, Saquon Barkley or Ezekiel Elliott, scoring an anytime touchdown in this game. So hope some of you guys got paid off of that. But Saquon had that touchdown run, and in that moment, it was like everyone on the Cowboys sideline remembered, oh shit, we're allowed to score, and decided to go out there and actually air this thing out. And so they end up doing just that. Tony Pollard goes for over 100 yards. Zeke Elliott has about 75 yards on the ground. Cooper Rush, 21 of 31 for 215 and a touchdown. Like, Brandon, this was the exact performance across the board from this Cowboys team that I think is emblematic of a team that knows their backup is playing. As much as Jerry Jones, I'm sure, is going to take sick pleasure in watching this game, seeing 2 straight wins for Cooper Kupp since Dak Prescott went down, and going back to his comments about hoping he plays good enough for a quarterback controversy, everything about the game plan reeked of a team that knows we can't and we shouldn't put this guy in a position to air this thing out 40 plus times, no matter who we're facing on the other side. And they didn't. They leaned on that ground game. They created opportunities downfield off big max protection play action shots, some of which were dropped, by the way. CeeDee Lamb had an egregious drop on a deep route early in the game that he made up for with a one-handed touchdown later on. But this, to me, is probably something the Cowboys should think about and continue to think about carrying over when Dak does come back. Because I think at some point in the last couple of years we've talked about different games are going to necessitate a different game plan. I think back to opening night a year ago when they faced off against the Tampa Bay Bucks then, and they decided to air it out 40 plus times because that was one of the best, if not the best, run defenses in the NFL. It's sort of the let Russ cook conversation where, yes, Dak Prescott has the ability to create outside of the normal realm of the play, has a better arm than Cooper Rush, and is a better quarterback than Cooper Rush, full stop. But if you do some of those same Cooper Rush things, especially as the offensive line is still working itself out, we saw Jason Peters, the 40-year-old former all-everything left tackle for the Eagles and Bills, get some time at left guard of all places in this one next to Tyler Smith, who's like 19 years his junior. It was good to see him out there, and they had him on a pitch count. They're still working him back into shape at this point, but looked good, immediately had a big run to his side coming in. And Brandon, while all that's getting worked out, while the weapons on this team are still getting worked out, and Noah Brown, who has been awesome at wide receiver, who is, everyone's talked about, it's the go-to storyline with Cooper Rush. They were on the second team together working. It's clearly paid off for them in game reps. While all the rest of that is still coming together, I feel like leaning into some of these things and allowing that same help and structure for Dak Prescott when he comes back, especially coming back off an injury, is going to be a formula that can help this team even more. And something that I think at times, play calling wise, Kellen Moore has certainly taken some heat in the past for getting away from some of the things that they do well and creatively in the ground, using Zeke and Tony Pollard together. So my hope is that not that there will be any quarterback controversy coming out of this, but that there will be an understanding and a realization of, all right, here are some really good ways that we found out how to use these pieces more consistently in spots where we couldn't rely on the quarterback. Let's make sure we give our really good quarterback that we paid a lot of money to that same help when he does come back.
Yeah, Mike, but I feel like what I saw last night that won't help anything is the fact that Kellen Moore's scripted plays to start the game are ass cheeks. He gets better as a play caller when he's got to figure it out from scratch. I just don't understand what's going on with Kellen Moore. I feel like this is a perfect opportunity for him to show just how good he is. But maybe he is, Mike. Maybe what I'm seeing from Cooper Rush is actually just an extension of Kellen Moore's calm, cool, collected demeanor going into this game.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for that. I think that for me, it's overall game plan. If your scripted plays are great or aren't great, that's one thing. I think sometimes those can get overthought by staffs who spend so much time with them. But when you get into the body of the game, you fall back on the things that you've developed all week and talked about with your quarterback. What are we comfortable with, and what do we think we can go out and execute based on the personnel that we've got? So thought they did that defensively.
Tony Pollard.
That group still Tony Pollard, man. I hope someday someone loves me as much as the Cowboys fan base loves Tony Pollard. And by that, I mean loves Tony Pollard in a very toxic comparison to a person they're still kind of in a relationship with, Ezekiel Elliott. It's not it's not a pure unrequited love. It's very much comparative and dirty, but I feel like every fan base has one of these.
I mean, it's not like you're thinking about an ex, Mike. You're talking about a big love situation, to go back to the Mormons and HBO's hit back in the day. It's like, I mean, it's easy to be comparative when you're talking about your only two unrequited loves in the backfield there, starting at the same time on Sunday Night Football to begin this whole season. So, but he looked good. Tony Pollard looked good.
He does, and everyone always, it's like the old free Aaron Jones conversation that used to go on with Green Bay, where he had all these really great efficient numbers, and he didn't have the volume people liked, and then he broke free that one season, and I'm sure part of Cowboys fans believe that Tony Pollard can be, and maybe he can be. There's certainly a notion of that. Ezekiel Elliott, markedly better pass protector, so there's give and take in both of those, but Cowboys fans, I see you, I feel you, and I appreciate your weird, strange fascination with this man. Fascination on defense still. This group is still balling up front. DeMarcus Lawrence had 3 sacks in this game. The Cowboys had 5 sacks overall. And just a reminder of how sometimes box scores can be a total lie. Micah Parsons technically had 1 tackle in this game. but was the most impactful defensive player up and down that lineup. They were doing the next-gen stats tracker for him the whole night, where he lined up in something like 8 different positions pre-snap. They moved him around. He caused havoc. I'll be interested to see the pressure numbers for him once that shakes out, but he's one of the purest game wreckers in the game right now. Probably the biggest game wrecker in the game right now. And I think that even includes Aaron Donald, just because you can move this guy in so many places. Now, he's not better than Aaron Donald. Full stop. No. Aaron Donald is the best at what he does in the NFL. But as far as what Micah can do to you, I think just because it's so much more cumbersome to try and account for a guy who they can move all over the place, they'll do that some for the Rams with Aaron Donald, but for the most part on the interior, you can throw multiple big bodies at a guy by redirecting protection, whereas on the edge, you've got chips and tight ends, but we see that's not always cohesive. As an offensive lineman, you're not as used to working with those guys, and we saw that, man. Evan Neal, the right tackle for the Giants, had a rough night that he's going to want to forget going up against one of the best pass rushers in the game in DeMarcus Lawrence. So that was a tough one, man. I felt for him. He's a really good player coming out of college who, based on what we've seen from Andrew Thomas, don't write Evan Neal off because of a couple of bad games to start the season. Andrew Thomas is playing, by some people's counts, as a Pro Bowl level right now. I heard Kyle Long talk about this in the Greenlight podcast. When you're a young player, especially a lineman, going up against guys that are vetted, second contract pass rushers, you're going to get got at some point early in the season. It's like we used to say in college, he's on scholarship too. And in this case, that guy's on a better scholarship than you because he's been doing this for longer. You just can't let it snowball and can't let it get so far in your head that it wrecks your whole year. So hopefully that's the case for him. But man, that was a tough one. Back
to Micah Parsons. He was almost inactive for this game. He had an illness. We didn't kind of going back and forth, and he's so young, Mike, that he posted the Jordan flu game tweet as if suggesting that he was going to give a flu game like performance, while people of our age and ilk are thinking like, oh, you just got really drunk last night, like.
Or he didn't watch The Last Dance and didn't realize that he was poisoned by a pizza.
Right, exactly.
He's so young that he didn't watch the documentary that came out in 2020 because he was busy being young.
He was probably getting ready to go to the NFL at that point in time. But yes, as much as I want to give credit to the Cowboys defense, which you always can. There's a lot of millions of dollars over there waiting for you to give the credit to them. Daniel Jones, Mike. There's something I love the concept of the quarterback being the reason why the sacks are coming, and that's a new phenomenon that Joe Burrow has introduced to me just watching how the quarterbacks play. And Daniel Jones, Mike, I would say, should we rank him in the top 5 of dual threat quarterbacks in the NFL? Like coming in at number 5, maybe honorable mention number 6. But
he might have been the best athlete on the field last night, like especially for the Giants offense.
He likes to flex it.
Well, like part of it was he was under duress so much in that game, and there was a struggle for a little while. Kenny Golladay, they talked about the struggles for him, only playing a couple snaps in the last game, bad drop down the stretch of this game. But Daniel Jones made some impressive throws and had, for a long time, their only source of rushing production in scrambles. I think Saquon Barkley ended up barely edging him out for the leading rusher in the game. But Daniel Jones was, basically operating what we've seen from Justin Fields and the Bears offense so far, which is drop back and then figure out where you're going to run screaming away from pressure.
I thought you were going to pause and say, Daniel Jones, he fast.
You know what else? He fast too.
Like, he fast. And obviously all the pressure was coming from the outside for the Cowboys, so that pocket was wide open for Daniel Jones right in the middle, so he had to take off and run. But he looks good doing it. I'm not necessarily worried about him the way I was worried about Andrew Luck when I saw him doing it, but I do think he leans on it a little bit too much. I think he might need to take a little page out of Russell Wilson's page and slow down running a little bit. Try to focus on the passing of the ball.
part of it is self-preservation in this game because he was pressured. I want to say in the first half of this game, in the first 2.5 quarters, he was pressured 16 times. So the dude was running for his life the majority of the game. But Brandon, part of that is also he's had a tough line in front of him for the last couple of years. He's probably internalized a lot of bad habits. And for Brian Daboll, the charge was, can you fix this in a year? Because they didn't pick up his 5th-year option. And so far through these games, while Daniel Jones has not, I think, been the reason, Daniel Jones, as right now, they're sitting 2-1 at this point. Daniel Jones, I don't think, has been a net negative for them, but I don't know if at this point it's trending to be enough for them to think about re-signing him in some capacity, right? This is still looking like a guy who's going to have to do more if he wants to be the Giants starting quarterback next year, because that's a similar conversation we had about Tua and about Jalen Hurts, who both right now have absolutely played up to a level that says they would be the starter in 2022. Or 2023, excuse me.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that right now Daniel Jones is Gardner Minshew-esque great backup and potentially could be a Cooper Rush level savior for a team if somebody goes down. But yeah, right now he's not panning out. I don't know, Mike. Some of those throws are really, really good.
So honestly, I'll give you a better comparison than that. Mitch Trubisky. And I think Mitch Trubisky has probably accomplished more early on. Daniel Jones for the first few years had those really bad fumble problems and was very turnover prone in that way. But I think for Mitch Trubisky, there was this notion that he had to still go and clean a bunch of things up, and people thought backing up in Buffalo for a year did that. Again, the Brian Daboll effect of things. So I think that might be a more accurate one because of some of the physical gifts, which means that if he can go and sit somewhere for a year in the right spot, he can absolutely find his way back into someone's good graces because he was drafted in the first round, and that's how it works for those guys. So Saquon Barkley looked really good tonight. The offensive line, when they actually blocked some plays up for him pretty well. Saquon had to be surprised because going back to Penn State, he's never had good blocking in front of him. But Brandon, the real star of this game was the blue-faced Giants fan that showed up in the crowd. I don't know if you saw him, the grown-ass adult man who was bald, painted blue with the one red stripe down his face. I saw him wearing a wedding ring, and I kind of made the remark that I reserve for serial killers who get letters in prison from the women who adore them, which is there's truly someone for everybody.
Yeah, Mike, I'm thinking about the painted faces is one thing, but you got to think about where you are, like New York, like getting on that subway or getting on that train, the New Jersey Transit to get to the stadium, all blue face painted late at night.
I will say I feel like the safest place for him to be contextually is the places that you just described because you're around other like-minded fans. It's when you hold up something local like that to the national audience that gets to see you on a primetime game, and that's when the internet starts to come for you. Because especially when your team's losing. It's like when Cam Newton wears a wild fedora to a game and then has to wear it in the press conference after once he's lost or had a bad game. That's when it starts to look a lot less funny. Russell Wilson wearing the Dumb and Dumber suit to his game back to Seattle at the start of the season. None of it looks very good when you're losing. So maybe he would have been celebrated for winning, and maybe we need to reframe our perspective on that. But either way, incredible effort from that man. We'll see if he makes it into the NFL's top 5, bottom 5. Coming up in a little bit in the show. But Brandon, on to something that actually will now be comparatively more interesting than that Monday Night Football game.
Woo.
Brandon, the Pro Bowl finally went ahead and did it. For anyone that missed the news yesterday, the NFL finally went ahead and did what people have been clamoring for years, as the Pro Bowl became really a game of touch football because so many guys wanted to, understandably, avoid catastrophic injury. Oddly enough, a guy we know really well in Tyler Eifert, who was at one point in time a really talented tight end for the Cincinnati Bengals, had a monster season, went to the Pro Bowl, and then suffered an ankle injury that really affected the trajectory of the rest of his career. And I think that was one of the many instances where the lights went on for guys. So the NFL's announced that they've eliminated the full contact All-Star game and are going to replace it with a week-long skills competition and flagged football game. The new event's going to be called the Pro Bowl Games. It's going to feature AFC and NFC players showcasing their football and non-football skills in challenges over several days. The 23 games are going to be in Las Vegas. The flag football game is going to be at Allegiant Stadium, and that'll be the weekend before the Super Bowl, so February 5th. Peyton Manning and Omaha Productions are going to shape programming to promote the event's content throughout the week, and Manning will also provide his perspective and be a part of the coaching staff for the flag football game. And Brandon, This is the smartest thing the NFL could have done. The Pro Bowl, while it's still, I'm sure, rated because everything football-wise rated, was steadily becoming stale. And at the same time, they had been kind of soft launching some of the more interesting events. The quarterback skills challenge with the funky obstacle course, the dodgeball games, the drone drop, all this stuff that I think was pretty well received. And so they finally just said, we're going to go all in on this. And thank freaking God, it's about time.
Yeah, Mike, I'm excited for something different, something new. I'm excited for kind of like to have something on my kids in this regard. Like, we're watching the Pro Bowl, I'm like, hey, y'all know back in the day, these full pads. You know what I mean? They, and even before then, Sean Taylor laid out a punter and almost decapitated him. Like we finally get to step into this new realm of like being able to say like the new normal of things. Because I do think that there's going to be some fun football played out there in the flag football realm, and like there's going to be new exciting. There's going to be people getting got and ankles getting broken and different things of that nature. Like I don't think the injuries are out of the question because if anybody plays flag football with me. Your lower body is EMT needs to be nearby. I'll say that. But these are professionals. I'm interested in seeing how it goes. But I would like to see more speed, agility, and smiles out there. Some sunglasses with some backwards visors. Like there's going to be a whole new vibe out there, Mike. Like I want to be a ball boy for the new Pro Bowl flag football games.
I'm less interested in the flag football game itself. I still think that's going to be far down the list for me. Really? I really hope that they lean into the opportunity to have some fun with the other events that they come up with. Like Brandon, I think, do you have any dream events for the Pro Bowl? Because I saw a couple that started jogging my mind. Jason Kelce, the center for the Philadelphia Eagles, who's been to a lot of Pro Bowls, suggested a hot dog eating contest among the big guys, which, excellent idea. I know a guy that's called a couple of Nathan's Famous hot dog contests that could definitely help you guys out with the production of that event, if you're so inclined. But that's the kind of stuff that we need here. Hot dog contest from Jason Kelce. We've seen dodgeball already. I saw a bunch of people float big guy 7-on-7. O-line and D-line only. 7-on-7. You remember before we played in the Sheraton Hawaii Bowl, and I mean we redshirted because we were redshirt freshmen and got to go on paid vacation to Hawaii for a week. But before that game, the day before, we would go out before practice. There's one section called Pat and Go where the quarterbacks just go and throw go balls, get warmed up with the wide receivers. Charlie Weiss came in before practice and said, we're going to switch it up. The receivers are going to go do the O-line, D-line warm-up, which is a bunch of ladder drills and bag drills and bullshit. And we got to go do Pat and Go, and it was like the happiest days of our life because offensive and defensive linemen don't get the chance to do fun stuff during practice, and so it was awesome. So big guy 7-on-7 seems like a foolproof idea because you need to put these guys in the situations that they've always wanted to be in and don't get to. It's like I say, why O-linemen and O-linemen drop weight post-career and running backs get fat is because we had to be fat for a long time and we wanted to be skinny, and running backs and skill guys had to be skinny, and a lot of them don't want to have to count their calories all the time or their metabolism just slows down.
Mike, I'm going to need your help with this one because this is my perfect thing. It happens a lot at lineman camps where you get to play football and everyone, it's like, I forget, what's the name of it though? Razzle dazzle.
I got you.
Razzle dazzle, Mike. Razzle effing dazzle. That's what I want to see in the Pro Bowl amongst linemen. A little lineman game of razzle dazzle. If you don't know what razzle dazzle is, it's basically anyone is quarterback can advance the ball down the field with a big pass, and it's touch once you get there, but you got to get to them. And it's a razzle dazzle. But outside of that, Mike, I think Squid Games showed me something that I really want to see. What? The suspended tug of war.
Oh, let's get some. I thought you were going to make kill these guys.
When we start murdering the best NFL players one by one.
I do love Team Tug of War, though. Obviously, without a fall to their death after, but
well, not a fall to their death, but like
into one of those.
Let's get with the holy moly people or the
one of those
wipeout people.
The squishy pits of foam that they use at gymnastics places. I've always wanted to jump into those. Again, give them a thing that they've always wanted to do. Football players never get to dump into those.
And also linemen are I want to say traditional. I would think that most linemen are afraid of falling for long periods of time just because of weight and inertia, and
I think a lot of football players are scared of heights. I don't know what I base that off of, other than some anecdotal experience. But I feel like football players have a larger percentage of players afraid of heights than most workplaces.
Right, it's just people that are just literally grounded in more ways than one. And I think that it will just give some high stakes, literally high stakes, if we get like 3 feet in the air, tug of war, 2 platforms, and see AFC versus NFC.
I mean, if they just did the full Squid Game with those guys, again, without the brutal murders involved in the middle, that could be entertaining in its own right. And it would be one of the very few times the NFL has been on time culturally in some of their references and would actually be drafting off a current trend. So something to ponder there.
Referees in the Reds jumpsuits.
Oh, I bet some of those refs would love that shit. Some of the other ones I had, I'll save my best idea for the end. One other one I thought of, karaoke would be great. I think you have team karaoke among these guys, turn it almost into like Masked Singer or America's Got Talent style thing, where maybe you've got judges from different branches of the league office or different coaches or something like that to have these guys and judge their singing. I
can tell you that it's a great idea because if you remember from our All-American game, U.S. Army All-American game, we had a singing competition. I sang for the East and won for the East in that competition right in front of Coach Boone and Coach Yost from Remember the Titans fame.
The actual ones, by the way, not Denzel.
Yes, Coach Boone and his wife. She was right there beside him. It was beautiful to see. But yes, I can't remember. Was it Raheem Moore? I can't remember it was a DB who I ended up beating. We sang Alicia Keys Falling, but it was surprisingly fun for everyone to see. Representatives for your team go out there and try to sing for the team.
And we know the audience loves this football-wise already because every year during Hard Knocks, we just saw Aiden Hutchinson become a star singing Billie Jean during the Lions Hard Knocks. People love it when you get guys a little bit out of what they're used to and get them singing in front there. Dodgeball's been a good one that I hope they go back to. I would love to see some sort of game show integrated, give Aaron Rodgers a place to go and not be problematic and do the things he loves. This is what I'm thinking, Brandon. That. You either go, you do it by divisions, I think. You would still have AFC versus NFC, but you break it up into divisions. Because I want either Family Feud between divisions, Double Dare, because then you'd have the physical challenge, or so you can incorporate more teams, you go Legends of the Hidden Temple. Just full-on recreate it. We've seen the NFL has the partnership with with Nickelodeon, so they've got the capabilities to pull this off licensing-wise. I think that would be a really big... Again, we talked about this the other day with Rihanna being the halftime show. If you're trying to appeal to who you think is the meat of your fan base, it's us, the people who grew up watching those shows.
Yes, we want to see the Blue Barracudas. I'm trying to think of the rest of the team names of the Legend of the Hidden Temple. Do you remember them?
No, I remember the Temple Guards and the Shrine of the Silver Monkey, though.
Silver Snakes. Like every team had a specific thing, but anyways, yes, that would be amazing, Mike. I'm definitely down for that. I see you over there feverishly looking stuff up, but I want to give out my next game.
It's the red jaguars, the blue barracudas, the green monkeys, the orange iguanas, the purple parrots, and the silver snakes.
Purple parrots is my ish. Always rooting for them. Very, very scary when the Temple Guard will pop up in a maze.
I can't believe more of them didn't get punched.
We're 90s kids. We do what we're told. We got demons, us 90s and 89s. I'm looking at you, Mike. Babies. Here's something else. I think this is important. I think this game should be brought into it. A little physical, gives you a little bit of barbaricness that we like with our football. Paper, rock, scissors, smack. Okay, so just sitting there. Hands locked, paper, rock, scissors. Obviously, strong hand, the one you're throwing out there with. Win or lose, strong smack across the face. And probably just 3 rounds of it. I think we should get a winner. Hopefully Aaron Donald would participate. I can see him winning that, being predictive of where the person's going to go, paper, rock, or scissors, and also that strong smack across the face. Because there's not a lot of room. You got to just do it within your range, but I think that'd be fun to see.
Number one, stop calling it paper, rock, scissors. It's rock, paper, scissors, you heathen. Second off, I love this idea. I went to one time, Wisconsin's big party weekend is called Mifflin up there. I don't even know if they still do it because someone got like stabbed the year after I went, and I think that changed the tenor of things. But it was one of the most insane parties I've ever been to. And when I pulled up there, the first thing I saw walking past a house party was two guys playing rock, paper, scissors, slap on their front lawn in the middle of a party. And that was when I realized this was going to be an incredible night. So all for that one. Even though it would definitely start fights out there that the NFL is not looking for. Brandon, the two that I want most involved, I want to bring back the NFL's strongest man. I don't remember how often they did that at the Pro Bowl, but I just went back and watched the other day Larry Allen do 43 reps of 225 wearing like Air Force One lows and barely warming up. It was another terrifying example of how strong Larry Allen is, but I feel like just in general, finding some strongman acts that won't hurt guys and will still impress the masses, awesome shit as someone who's a child of growing up watching the world's strongest man. But more than anything, Brandon, the number one thing I've always campaigned for at the Pro Bowl, pick up basketball. You got to find a way to make it a part of it. I don't know if you go 3-on-3 so that the spacing is better and you have fewer guys banging bodies in there, but the number one thing football players want to do, and you know this, Brandon, because the amount of conversations had in our locker room about could we field a starting five that would beat our scholarship basketball team were too many to count. That is the mentality every football locker room is full of, and you need to give them an outlet for it, and it needs to be at the Pro Bowl.
Oh, man. I don't even have the words to talk about just how much football players love to play basketball, but also think that they could be professional basketball players. They just chose the thing with the helmet.
Well, because there's a lot of guys that had offers coming out of high school, and they used that as the continued fuel to say, I could have done this, and I just chose not to.
Mike, I'll say this. I got a second interview for an All That audition when I was a child. In my mind, I could have been Kenan Thompson to this day.
That's on God.
I just didn't go. I told my mom, you know what? I ain't trying to go to Orlando. Let's not do that.
Oh, man. I'm glad you don't hold that against your mom. I once got asked walking into the mall if I wanted to go and see a movie that was being screened and then give my thoughts and a review of it after. And my mom said, no, we're busy and we have places to go, and told me I'll have another chance to do that at some point. And I never had another chance to do that. And short of my mom selling my Pokemon cards out from under it is the number 2 thing that I hold against my mom for the rest of my life, is that I was robbed of my chance to be a heard and valued movie critic.
And like you were in the demo because you were asked.
Yes, they saw me and they clearly saw potential. They're like, oh, he's the one. We need him in this. And my mom thinking, oh no, this just happens all the time. Cost me an opportunity. Never forget it. As long as I live.
You could have affected that second edit. Also, since we're just talking about our accolades as children at malls and whatnot, I won a Oreo stacking competition back in the day in Detroit at a Target, and I could have went to the next level, Mike, but I just didn't. I didn't sign the paperwork. I just went there, showed out, and got out of there.
I love the idea of you being like an American Idol contestant and bawling out at the first audition and be like, nah, I'm good.
No, I just had to prove it to myself that I could.
I just had to show myself. It's not about you or the world. It's about who's in here. It's about little Brandon who's got to know.
Intrinsic.
God.
Ooh, okay.
So, as always, tweet us at GoJo Show. Download, subscribe, rate, and review. 5-star rating and a review. If you got anything else that needs to be added to the Pro Bowl, or if you're Omaha Productions and you just want to call us and let us fill out the programming, because as you've seen, we've got ideas. These are all our intellectual property, and if you steal any of them, we will lawyer up, even though the Mannings would absolutely wear me down with money in court, and that would end in horrible financial ruin for your boy. But I will still make idle threats about this. So Omaha, call us. We can be a friend to you on this front. Speaking of friends, Brandon, we're going to get to talk to Roddy Jones here in a second, ACC Network and ESPN college football analyst, and about a lot of things in the world of college football, one of which wasn't our alma mater, who's a little bit back right now. I think North Carolina was the perfect slump buster for Notre Dame, considering defense is not an area that they are very strong in right now. And so the Notre Dame rushing attack got back online. Austin Estime looked like a freaking beast out there. Tyree, all those dudes. Jeez. Michael Mayer, big game for some reason, and somehow North Carolina decided covering the best tight end and probably the best player on the field wasn't a thing they wanted to do. So overall, was super surprised on a weekend where so many teams dealt with turmoil in college football. Michigan close one with Maryland, Oklahoma losing to Kansas State, the game I was at and calling, Clemson going to overtime with Wake Forest. It was such a relief to be walking into the stadium and just casually checking the score and being up 3 touchdowns. I could get used to that again.
I'll tell you what, North Carolina, that was the game for us to do it. I don't know. It's in this new realm of Notre Dame football. North Carolina just seems to be the tune-up game. It's always been a high. It's always forced us to score a lot of points, which is always good for us moving on in our season.
It's very good. Yes, you're right, especially for Drew Pine, the quarterback. He looked so much more comfortable out there. The line looked more comfortable in front of him, which is the second week. This is what I was talking about when I said it's nice that the eyes won't be on Notre Dame anymore. Because Notre Dame won that game and no one cared and no one talked about it. And that's perfect because you heard Marcus Freeman say after the game, this is about process right now, which is exactly what we said. It's a chance for them to just go and do the work of developing this team. And right now, it looks like that's happening. They got deep into the bench with some freshman guys who they were getting out onto the field, some new numbers out there for Notre Dame fans to tap in with. And this is, again, these are all good and positive signs. And now I understand Cal and North Carolina aren't world beaters. Clemson and USC are still going to be the marker games on the schedule for where we're actually at in this. But these are positive signs and a sign that this season is still going to have a ton of value. And we saw that show up out on the field against North Carolina. So very excited for the Irish, very excited for Coach Freeman and company. Again, everyone just leave Notre Dame alone right now. Don't look in our direction. You got plenty of other stuff to worry about. Let them keep doing the work, and then all of a sudden we'll see what's going on in November when we show back up here. But in the meantime, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to Roddy Jones about the rest of what went on this weekend in college football. All right, Roddy Jones back with us on the podcast here, ESPN and ACC Network analyst. You can also catch him and me chopping it up on Mondays on College Sports Now, which is always a good time there. And Roddy, I feel like given your broad range of expertise, because I want to talk to you about Michigan and Clemson and some of the teams that you've seen and gotten to be on the call for this season in college football and just kind of the general landscape. We're about a third of the way through the season already, just taking stock of what we got here. But very high demand right now for you as, unfortunately, Georgia Tech making some changes, your alma mater at the top of the program here. Jeff Collins, their head coach, as well as the athletic director, both let go this week. And it feels like everyone has just taken this opportunity, Roddy, to start to have the Deion Sanders to the Power 5 conversation with Georgia Tech as the helm. So how are you feeling right now? Because I know changes at the top of the program are always kind of a difficult thing to digest.
Yeah, man. To be honest, I'm a little sad. This was certainly coming, and I'm not sad, obviously, at the fact that Jeff Collins is leaving, although I do have a personal relationship with Jeff Collins. I've known him since I was a recruit. He was at Georgia Tech as a director of player personnel. The results suggested that this was going to happen, but whenever your program is at a place where you have to fire a coach and an athletic director midseason, you're in a bad place. So I think I'm sad at the realization that the program that I played for, that I grew up with, being a guy from Atlanta, is at that place. Now, that being said, I think there's some optimism about the direction of the program going forward. And honestly, there's some optimism about Georgia Tech having to make some really hard decisions about where they want to be in the football landscape that will bring a lot of clarity and hopefully a lot of positive energy to the program. But anytime you have to fire your head coach and your athletic director before September ends in a football season, you're not in a good spot. So there is some sadness that comes with it.
And you mentioned Jeff Collins had been there before as a player personnel role, came back here and really seemed excited about what he could try and do. A lot of it was focused on branding around the culture. Jeff Collins, even going back to Temple, had been a really high energy guy and someone who was going to be a good salesman for the program. And that didn't end up translating in the way that a lot of people thought it might onto the field. And this is a program that was making the transition from being a triple option team, trying to take advantage of that Atlanta metro area as such a fertile recruiting hotbed right now. Roddy, in your mind, when you look at now, because all that stuff I talked about identity-wise for the program, who does Georgia Tech need to be, or who can Georgia Tech be in the modern college football landscape now, and how does this next hire impact that?
Yeah, I think Georgia Tech should be a team where the floor, the absolute floor, unless you have a ton of injuries and you just have one of those years. I think the floor is certainly a bowl team. That's what it was for 18 straight years until 2017, where under Paul Johnson they missed it for the first time since I believe it was like whatever it works out to be. I think 98 or 97. So that I think is the floor of this team. And then at its peak, it's a team that needs to, in a year where you don't have a national championship contender, you need to be able to compete for and win the league. That's where Georgia Tech needs to be, which, by the way, the three prior head coaches before Jeff Collins all either shared the ACC championship, which George O'Leary did, played for the ACC championship, which Chan Gailey did in 2006, or won an ACC championship, which Paul Johnson did in 2009. So it has been done. Now, that was at a time where the ACC didn't have a Florida State of the early teens and Clemson certainly of this era, but that's where Georgia Tech needs to be. And so, to me, it's more thinking about how do you achieve that? Is it through recruiting? Is it through development? And I think it's a little bit of both, being in Atlanta. But looking at like what Wake Forest has been able to do with Dave Clawson and the investment that he's been made in the program, and I think even a probably a more apples to apples comparison is Dave Doran at NC State, a developer of talent, multiple first round picks, a guy that gets good recruits out of North Carolina, not the best out of that state because they go to Georgia and they go to UNC and they go to some of the big name programs, Clemson. But he gets enough good recruits where he's boosted that thing to where the only time they didn't make a bowl game in recent memory was that 2018 season where they were young and had a ton of injuries. So that's kind of where I think they need to sort of model themselves with this hire. And,
we'll get to the one big name. A lot of the names that also get brought up, I think, are going to be the more the usual suspects going forward. Jamie Chadwell at Coastal, Charles Huff at Marshall, Sean Clark at App. Those guys are always going to get mentioned there. Roddy, is that kind of where you think the hire should come from? Group of five coaches that seem like they're up and coming here? Because I feel like sometimes you'll see programs reach back into the past, go for retread hires, and try and splash with a name.
Yeah, Bill O'Brien's been a name that's been thrown out a bunch because of his ties with both Georgia Tech and the ACC. I think you're going to get in a situation where you can't pay Bill O'Brien enough. Like he's gonna be in the running for, Nebraska's probably calling him already. If Auburn makes a move on Brian Harsin, that's a call that they would make as well. So I think realistically, yes, you're probably looking at a group of five head coach, an established group of five head coach. And when I'm looking at that, I want a guy who has not only shown that he can win at that level, but also has multiple stops of demonstrated success prior to that, preferably at schools that don't have the resources that its peers do, because that's what I think would have led you to the belief that Dave Clawson was going to be successful. He did it at Fordham. He did it at Richmond. He did it at Bowling Green. That's what would suggest that Dave Doran was going to be successful. He did it at Montana. He did it at Northern Illinois. So how do you find that track record amongst people? And like none of that's going to be perfect, but yeah, that's kind of the type of coach that I think Georgia Tech should go for, rather than like the splashy coordinator, first time head coach, that sort of. It just feels like Georgia Tech can't take that chance right now. And I'm not saying that the safe hire is sacrificing the higher ceiling. I just think that right now Georgia Tech needs some stability and really some substance.
Deion Sanders is the name that everyone's going to keep bringing up, I think, for a lot of these Power 5 jobs. And part of this is proximity, what people believe he can do in the Atlanta area with his pedigree and his background and with the success that he's had at Jackson State so far. Roddy, do you think it's at all realistic with Deion at this point, or is that someone who's only going to jump when we start talking about some of the big-time Power 5 jobs that may eventually come calling?
I don't think it's realistic because I think level of commitment to football is going to be a question that Deion has that I don't know if Georgia Tech is going to answer to his satisfaction. Now, maybe they will, but that would be a departure from where Georgia Tech has been in the past. There's also the matter of Georgia Tech as a school with very high academic standards. And so there's the matter of not only the places where Deion Sanders has worked and its academics, but also Deion Sanders' personal academic record is going to come into question prior, because there are some. I think if you dig into to the college degree and all that stuff, obviously that's something that Tech would have an issue with. And I think as a larger body, Georgia Tech fans would kind of push back on that. So no, I don't think it's realistic. I think that Deion Sanders will fit at a Power 5. I think the academic restrictions at Georgia Tech would make it tough for him to do what he's done at Jackson State.
Roddy, let's look big picture in college football, especially coming off the weekend that we had in week 4. It seemed like all the teams that we've talked about as a potential contender for that 4th team near the top outside of the Alabama, Georgia, and Ohio State crust got tested in a big-time way here. Maryland had Michigan on the ropes. Clemson and Wake Forest went into overtime. Oklahoma lost to Kansas State full-on, and USC and Oregon State played a game that we all had to get updates from Brett McMurphy and company online because so many people found out they don't have the Pac-12. Did you have the Pac-12 network, Roddy? Were you someone that was actually able to watch that, or were you looking at the timeline like the rest of us?
I do not have Pac-12 network. I knew that going in, though, so I wasn't surprised at all by it. I knew I wasn't going to be able to watch this game. It felt very much like the Oklahoma game from a couple years ago that was on pay-per-view, where none of us could watch it. So we were just on Twitter like what's going on? And then on Monday, all of us talked about it as if we acted like we watched it, but none of us saw it. And so that's kind of how I feel about this game.
It was incredible. Andy Staples and Brett McMurphy, I think, saw someone compared them to Shams and Woj going toe-to-toe on the timeline to try and see who could break plays first from that game. So thank them both for their service. You're right, so that the rest of us can cape like we saw any amount of that football game. But Roddy, listen, you work at the ACC and you get to see this Clemson team a lot. They've been oft talked about through this season. You covered Michigan in one of their last real tune-up games at the start of this season. Both of them got tested in a big way. As you look at those teams and kind of compare and contrast them now, was there one that surprised you more with the result that we got this past weekend with how close that game was?
Look, man, I think it's a good question because Michigan had not been tested at all. I would say Michigan surprised me more. I thought they were further along than obviously than Maryland. Wake Forest is a good football team, and I think Wake Forest believed that they could beat Clemson probably for the first time since Dave Clawson's been there. Like real, true, in my bones belief that we are going to win this game. Now they didn't because Clemson has better athletes, and those better athletes just out-athleted Wake Forest. But on the Michigan side, I thought overall this was a team that would take care of business against Maryland in a way that they didn't a week ago. Now, some of that's going to be growing pains with the two first year play callers and the way that they're calling plays, which, by the way, we went there, talked to Jim Harbaugh and the two offensive coordinators, and no one divulged any secrets about how plays are being called. I don't actually know that they're calling plays. They may just be picking them out of a hat with all these guys just like taking turns picking them. I don't know.
They've gone full New England Patriots as far as just saying, yeah, we're going to go with vibes-based play calling.
100%. Like, who is the New England Patriots offensive coordinator? We don't know. They have two of them, which means they basically maybe have none, and it may be Jim Harbaugh. Who knows? But overall, like their ability to take care of business, the commitment to the run. Blake Corum was very good in the game. I'm not surprised that Maryland was able to move the ball against Michigan. I think Maryland's pretty good on offense, and Michigan's still figuring itself out on defense. But I think, but that result, the fact that game was close, did surprise me more than Clemson playing an overtime game with Wake Forest.
Is that Michigan team right now ahead of this Clemson team in your mind still?
That's a really good question. It's tough to tell with Clemson based on last week because they were so depleted in the secondary, and they played Nate Wiggins, who's a sophomore, Fred Davis is a young player, Toriano Pride and Jaden Lucas, who are true freshmen, and those dudes got baptized. They got baptized against Wake Forest. So it's hard to know what this group looks like when they're healthy. Andrew Makuba, the defensive player of the year, rookie of the year in the ACC, didn't play. So that back end was really banged up. If you press my feet to the fire, I'd say Clemson's a little bit further ahead because I do think they made steps offensively that you're able to build off of. Thought Brandon Streeter was great in his ability to use the tight ends and formations to help clear up pictures for DJ. The thing is, though, DJ hit a lot of low percentage throws during this game. And will that continue? I tend to say no, but I still would place them a little bit ahead of where Michigan is just because there were steps taken by DJ. And there's still a question of like Michigan's an offense with a ton of weapons, but like not a go-to yet. So outside of Blake Corum, it's great to have all these different pieces. But if you don't know who the guy's going to be in the moment, then I have some questions about who you are. And I'm not sure they have that at the top end.
Does Clemson have a go-to on offense yet? Because you mentioned, I thought the same thing. Getting more tight end bodies on the field, a little bit more 12 personnel, 9 that tight end is, I think, looking like a pretty good pass-catching target for them as well. Do they have a go-to guy outside of maybe Will Shipley in the backfield on offense?
No, and I think they're developing that. But all of those guys played well during that game. Jake Brenningstool, the guy you're talking about, is a sophomore tight end that's sort of that flex tight end that can be moved all over the place. Davis Allen's a 6'6" underrated tight end because he does a lot of the blocking work in the run game, and then is a really good pass catcher. Has made plays for them. But so it's a good question by you. They don't have that go-to, but I think with Joseph Ngata and Bo Collins and EJ Williams, there's enough there where you think they'll be able to cobble it together. And while Michigan has something similar with Eric All and Luke Schoonmaker and some of the receivers they have, I think there's just still more questions maybe about that group because the top end talent is there at Clemson, and I'm not sure the top end talent is there at Michigan.
And you said DJ took some steps this week. What did that look like? Because he's been a quarterback who, going back to last year, has been under a bigger microscope than most just because the standard is so otherworldly high at Clemson for what we expect there. What's his development looked like in the early portion of the season? We all got to hear about him losing weight, leaning out, feeling more confident, but what's that look like with Brandon Streeter's offense so far?
I think that first and foremost, the confidence is there, man. Like he's talking smack on the field. He's like, he's fired up in a way that we just didn't see him last year. A lot of last year, it felt like, it felt like a guy that knew he was being talked bad about. And so he didn't want to go out there and showboat or anything like that. But on the field, his accuracy underneath has been better. He's made more layups. Clemson for years has had in its offense these easy access throws, like a little out to the field, quarterback Trevor Lawrence raises it up, tosses it to Justin Ross or T. Higgins. They get 8 yards because that guy catches it at 5, turns up field, gets pushed out of bounds. It's an 8-yard play. It sets up 2nd and 2. He couldn't hit those a year ago. And now he's starting to. So it's been a little bit more consistent from that perspective. The throws that he made in that Wake Forest game were spectacular. They were, again, I'll say it again. They were low percentage throws down the field. I mean, talking 30, 40 yards down the field. But the fact that he made as many of them as he did is certainly improvement. And will it continue at the same rate? No, but it's more than he hit a year ago. So I think that development's been good. And he's been a more willing and more effective runner too. So all of those things put together, you have a better quarterback. It's still not the standard of Clemson quarterback that we've become accustomed to, but he certainly has gotten better this season.
Yeah, not everyone can eat caviar for lunch every day for a decade plus, and I think that's what Clemson have been doing at quarterback for so long. I'm with you. There was a play in that game where they called a draw for him, and he went and just completely buried his shoulder into the chest of a linebacker in a way that felt wholly unfair. And it reminded me of that first DJ play when he went in against Miami a few years back when Trevor was still there, and they ran QB power. He baptizes some Miami linebacker, and we go, oh, they've got the next one. It felt like that dude back a little bit, to your point about the confidence there, because last year almost felt like the yips for DJ. Like I remember the Syracuse game that we got to call, and that did just look like a quarterback that was overthinking everything that he did. So this is a huge development for them.
Yeah, and I think some of that too. I wonder how much of that they told him to hold back on last year because he got banged up with his knee a little bit, but also they didn't have a backup quarterback last year.
Yeah.
Tyson Pumachan, nice guy, but he's not an ACC quarterback. So without a backup, how much of that were they having to rein back with DJ in a way that they're not having to do this year because you've got Cade Klubnik, who's at least from a talent perspective belongs on that level.
Elsewhere in the ACC, because we know Clemson's going to be in this conversation all year long, that defense, it's actually comical watching them on tape next to teams with normal humans like Wake Forest. Brian Brzee looks like the ogre from Harry Potter or the troll in Harry Potter that wanders into the castle. He's just reaching over people to make tackles. Terrifying to watch. Makes me glad that I got out of the game when I did before we started birthing these aliens on a more regular basis. But we know they're going to be there. NC State's in the top 10 now, but Roddy, this last weekend of the ACC, what the hell's going on in Miami right now? Middle Tennessee State going out there and absolutely thumping the Hurricanes. Because you're
housing Miami.
Roddy, we heard their coach talking his shit after the game. Correct me if I'm wrong. This was wall to wall. This was a team that wasn't fluky. They went out there and beat the Hurricanes.
Oh, it was wall to wall. And here's the thing, man. Like, first off, Tyler Van Dyke, the what happened to Tyler Van Dyke story is something that we're going to be talking about all season if this thing doesn't get corrected, because he looks like a completely different quarterback. He was terrible in this game. The first interception was just a lazy read. He just tosses it out wide, like expects a cover 2 corner to expand, doesn't check the corner at all, just throws it and a guy breaks on the ball, picks it off. That was sort of emblematic of what happened over the course of the season. Middle Tennessee made Miami look slow. Middle Tennessee had plays of 98, 89, 71, 69 in the game. Like against Miami, Middle Tennessee. It was crazy, man. Miami had to scratch to get back within 2 scores in this game, 2 touchdowns in this game. So I think the issues with Miami are systemic. Like Manny Diaz was not the problem with Miami, and Mario Cristobal, just his arrival is not going to be the fix, because those guys looked uninterested in being there. They looked shell-shocked when Middle Tennessee actually didn't roll over just because Miami showed up on the field. And they couldn't run the ball against Middle Tennessee. They couldn't cover Middle Tennessee. So Miami's got some real life issues that they're going to have to get fixed. And I think it starts with the culture first and foremost, which is something that Mario Cristobal was supposed to correct in short order because he was back, the work was back. But I think there's a lot of people on the West Coast looking at Miami and being like, this is the experience. This is what you get.
Well, I was going to say, especially on the quarterback front, because so many people, especially as Oregon fans tried to cope, and people in general on the West Coast tried to cope with losing Mario Cristobal back to Miami, was, well, look at what the offense was like with Justin Herbert. The guy we see on Sundays wasn't the guy that we saw on Saturdays, and how much of that was the offense that they were using him in as a part of. And I think with Tyler Van Dyke seeing a lot of this RPO-based offense, seeing him get fewer chances, I think, to air it out downfield, certainly could be some part of that. But Roddy, like you mentioned, the culture part of this, we had Tyler Van Dyke and the quotes going out there about how Miami doesn't have a college atmosphere and everyone running wild with all of that. Is this something you believe that Mario Cristobal can get fixed here in the next couple of seasons? Like, what has to happen the rest of this year for year one to be set? As a Notre Dame fan, I've been asked that question a lot about our program. What does success look like this year now that you're not in the places you're normally at? So what does success look like for Miami knowing what's already happened this season?
Well, at least as a Notre Dame fan, you had like a familiar sighting this weekend of the offensive line absolutely dominating, holes the size of Canada opening up. And I know your heart just had to be full and warm. But I look at Miami. If they do not compete at the top of the Coastal this year, a Coastal that is quite honestly pretty bad this season, especially when you look at what Virginia Tech's bringing, Virginia's bringing, Georgia Tech's bringing. Duke is like a team that we're looking at like, hey, like Duke, middle of the road Coastal team. They just got housed by Kansas. They didn't get blown off the field. It ended up being a 1-score game, but Kansas controlled that game for most of the game. So like outside of Pittsburgh and Carolina's defense is brutal. if you're not competing at the top of the Coastal, it's going to be a disappointment. And it should be, to be quite honest, because if Manny Diaz had been retained this year, like that would have been the expectation. And there's no reason that would change under Mario Cristobal. And actually, it should go up. So the things that I think they need to do, they need to be more consistent on the offensive line, because I thought the offensive line, especially in pass pro, was very disappointing. And Middle Tennessee's got some good players, but the inability to run the football, and I thought there was too much pressure on the quarterback during this game. The second thing is you can't have the type of egregious defensive bust that Miami had. Like, again, we thought this was over with Manny Diaz being gone and they were going to tackle better and they were going to be more sound. Their run fits still leave a lot to be desired. And yeah, it's some of the same guys, but man, they can't fit the run worth a damn. And then secondly, the secondary just looked slow. And if you look slow against Middle Tennessee, I mean, what's that going to look like? The ACC is not a great receiver conference, but I can pick out somebody on every single one of those teams at receiver that can give you a tough time if you can't run in the secondary. So those two things have to be fixed. But if Miami's not, they play Pitt the last weekend of the season. If Miami is out of the race and it doesn't matter who wins that game, and with Pitt going to the ACC championship, I think it'll be a disappointment for Mario Cristobal.
It's amazing to consider some of those things, especially you mentioned the consistency up front. I think that was something people thought for sure would be pacified by Mario Cristobal coming over here and the standard he's got in that spot. It's scary hours very early. Lift my friend Mike Ryan up into your prayers right now. Golden Kane absolutely not having a great time. Roddy, you're also going to the fair with your family later today, and I'm just curious because I'm someone who greatly enjoys a good fair. How do you attack the fair? You obviously go and you've got other responsibilities. You're dad at the fair, so you've got to balance that stuff with the kids. But what is Roddy Jones's approach to going to the fair?
First and foremost, you need activities early on. We can't be sitting in lines for too long. So here's what happens. The kids go get in the line of the ride they want to ride the most. Like, pick your favorite ride, first one you see, preferably close to the front. We'll work our way to the back, but you go stand there while dad goes and gets tickets and cash. So that's the game plan walking in. And then we just kind of go with the flow, man. Like, obviously you got to keep the kids well fed so that the attitudes don't creep in. And you try not to indulge yourself too much, because there's so many good, delicious fried foods. Funnel cake is almost certainly going to happen, but we got to keep it to just a funnel cake. Like, if I allow the funnel cake to be there, the ice cream to be there, if we get cotton candy and that sneaks in there, then that's an L for me. I'm going to pay for that for a while. So we're trying to keep the food consumption to a minimum for me, trying to keep the kids well fed. Everybody stays hydrated, and we'll all get out of there alive.
That's interesting. So you're saying you're not going here to you're not going here to indulge. You're trying to stay in the narrow path at the fair.
It's bad enough during football season when I'm on the road. Yeah. Like, I mean, you know how it gets, man. Like, we went to Pittsburgh and had an Italian spread that was unlike any other on Friday. I'm still working that off. I can't double down with like fried Snickers and a funnel cake. I can't do it.
It's so true, and it's the cost-benefit analysis that happens all football team, because you're right. I saw your pictures. You got to go to Permane Brothers, which is awesome. Yep. Love going. Carson Street's a blast, and if you want to eat your way through it, it can be that good friend to you. But you're right. You're trying to train so that in the weekends you can enjoy this stuff. And while I love a good fair, and I would lack the self-control that you've displayed here, because you're right, got to have the fried dough mixed into all this, fried dough elephant ear, whatever people want to call it. I'm usually going to throw a corn dog down the hatch, any sort of fried meat on a stick, really hard. When they do those potato spirals on the stick too, always a little intrigued by those. And then you mentioned cotton candy is my biggest weakness. I don't know where you fall on cotton candy overall. I know a lot of people have opinions about that. Love cotton candy. And especially if I'm at a sporting event where someone's hawking that, or if I'm at some sort of county fair, I'm almost always going to grab a bag of that and give myself a headache.
Well, I am not a cotton candy fan, Mike. I am not. I can resist cotton candy in most situations, but if cotton candy creeps in at a fair, like, that's a marriage that you just can't deny. I have to grab the cotton candy for nostalgia's sake. I'm going to have it melt on my fingers a little bit. Yep. I'm going to eat it, and then I'm just going to be sticky for the rest of the day, and I don't like that. I don't like it at all. I will regret my decision in multiple ways, but I have to do it because it brings me back to my childhood.
Cotton candy is almost always a regret. It is almost, you're never going to leave that and feel good, both internally or externally, because you're right. I can just feel that crust on my fingers right now, and it's a nightmare.
And you can't deny it, because if it's colored cotton candy, like your tongue is blue, your face is blue, your fingers are different colors. And so not only do you have the regret, but you're living with it, and you have visual proof that reminds you of it constantly.
And it's got to undermine your credibility as a dad, because I'm sure you're trying to keep your kids somewhat clean. You're trying to make sure they go here and act right. If they look and see you got stinky boo-boo fingers, then all of a sudden you're in trouble.
And they're like, Dad, I can't take you seriously with a blue tongue. I'm like, you better take me seriously with this blue tongue.
I appreciate, too, that bars and restaurants, the high-end, highfalutin ones, have started to lean into this knowledge that they know most of us can't resist cotton candy and that we're all little kids. And so you'll see them do the real artsy drinks where they'll melt a bunch of cotton candy into it after, or they'll light some of it on fire, which feels really hazardous. But either way, they know cotton candy really does have a strange hold on us the more I talk about this. Wow.
It does. I hadn't thought about the drinks. I thought, the novelty of it, not only has it crept into like the sporting events and the places where it belongs, but also on high-end cocktails. I had forgotten about that. I don't typically order my cocktails coming with cotton candy, but I'll have to keep an eye on that.
Yeah, I think that's more for the folks that are going to find themselves trying to influence behavior on Instagram. I don't know, Roddy, if you consider yourself an Instagram influencer at this point. The food pictures from last week influenced me online, so you did a good job with that. The very least.
I'm just trying to influence people for princess birthday parties and maybe the occasional hot take. Not so hot take. I don't have hot takes, but the occasional football take. But that's about the extent of my influence.
Princess birthday parties and football takes. You can get them all anytime you tap into Roddy Jones. Roddy, we appreciate the time, man. Best of luck at the fair. I hope you can avoid sticky fingers.
Appreciate it, brother. We'll try.
All right, Tuesday around here means we give you the top 5 and bottom 5 things from the NFL weekend that was. It can be really anything. This is a loose top 5 list. You'll get the top 5 teams in the NFL from me and Dad later on in the week. But Brandon, this week you were in the penthouse. You got the top 5. I have the bottom 5, and we tried some listener feedback last time and alternated 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, each of us going top 5 to bottom 5. Figure we try it again around here. So I'll give you first crack at it, Brandon. Start off the top 5 things from NFL Week 3. What do you got?
Starting out with number 5, Mike, and this may be a proximity, recency bias, all the other things. Cooper Rush. I said that the Dallas Cowboys have the potential to go undefeated while Cooper Rush was starting at quarterback. And Dak Prescott is hinting at coming back next week, as early as next week after getting the stitches out of his thumb. So I could be right on this, but Central Michigan's finest led the Cowboys, the first undrafted quarterback to win each of his 3 NFL starts and throw for 750 yards or more since Kurt Warner in 1999 with the Rams. I still got to watch that movie, Mike. Obviously, Kurt Warner went on to win NFL MVP and Super Bowl MVP that season, something we're not expecting Cooper Rush to do. But shout out to him and how he's handling these things. It was 215 yards I think he threw for, and a touchdown to CeeDee Lamb, that one-handed grab. But shout out to Cooper Rush, top 5 in the NFL.
I tell you what, if we have seen nothing else from Chase Daniel, it is being a backup quarterback who can come in short stints and play really well by backup standards can be an incredibly lucrative career, and being someone Jerry Jones trusts over a long period of time also seems like it could be very financially beneficial to you. So Cooper Rush, go out there and get that money, keep stamping that backup card. Brandon, number 5 on the bottom 5 from the NFL weekend I went Urban Meyer, just because we were looking at a 2-1 Jacksonville team that looks really good right now and just boat raced 2 teams in succession in the Colts and the Los Angeles Chargers that people thought were good, and I think in the Chargers case, when healthy, still could be. But Urban Meyer somehow managed to turn chicken salad into chicken you-know-what with that team last year, and did it in one of the uglier ways possible. Obviously ended with the accusations of kicking his kicker. So that's a tough look right now. And I feel like a lot of the conversation around this Jacksonville team was, yeah, I know Trevor Lawrence was a rookie, but how were they that inept with what they had under the hood last year?
Yeah, it was really ugly. And Doug Peterson is on my list, so I'll save my commentary for that. Next, in number 4 in top NFL of last week, the Miami Dolphins. Scorching hot, white hot, if you will, like their Miami Heat. And obviously all the good things that are going on with Tua. It's confirmed that it was a back issue. That's why he was wobbly. Everything's on the up and up. And I do believe Mike McDaniel, because I think he's too much of a nerdy, safe guy to really break the rules like that, especially earlier on. I feel like, he would have rolled it out with Teddy Bridgewater if he would have had to. But the reason they're at number 4 for me, Mike, is not that big win over the Bills. Surprisingly enough, it's them opening up their practice facilities to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in preparation for Hurricane Ian. I want to say Ian. I like to say Ian just because I like to do things backwards and wrong. But obviously, during the Gulf Coast of the tropical storm, Hurricane Ian is coming up the Gulf Coast of Florida, really hitting all the hot spots of that, Tampa, Clearwater, Sarasota's over there, all those things over there. So obviously, the Miami Dolphins have a short week. They're playing the Bengals on Thursday Night Football in Cincinnati. So they are traveling to Miami to use their practice facilities to get ready for the game. And yet another element, yet another obstacle, another line item variable to this what's going to be a very difficult game for them on Thursday. So it's good to pay attention to, but shouts out to them opening up their facilities and letting another NFL team in Florida come out there and kind of bunker down and stay safe from Hurricane Ian.
Yep, hopefully, and everyone else down there, obviously stay safe. That's always scary stuff. I know a lot of people down in that area are used to having to get ready for these kind of events, but still doesn't make it any less perilous once it finally shows up. So everyone stay safe down there. Very classy move by the Dolphins. Brandon, number 4 on the bottom 5 from the NFL weekend. Drones. 2 times this weekend in the world of football, once in college and once in the NFL, we saw drones flying over stadiums and having to stop gameplay. The first happened when the Washington Huskies were at their field playing Stanford, and play had to be suspended, and pictures actually came out of a drone hovering over the stadium for an extended amount of time. And then on Sunday, during the Seahawks game against the Falcons, the same thing happened in the fourth quarter of that game. Both teams were shown clearing the field as NFL officials tried to get a handle of what was going on. And for them, it's a player safety issue. You don't know, and they think of the most nefarious possibilities with drones. Federal Aviation Administration has strict laws against flying drones in or around stadiums with 30,000 or more in capacity. And drone use is prohibited beginning 1 hour before and 1 hour after scheduled NFL, MLB, NCAA, or NASCAR events, with up to a $37,377 fine, which is way too pretty of a number for a fine to be handed out. That seems very odd that they would pick 37377, but Brandon, being drone weirdos, and we see plenty of people with drones out there, and we know especially in the Pacific Northwest, everyone's going to think of Amazon drones and Jeff Bezos just having a delivery robot gone rogue, but sort of just weirds me out. And it feels like there's probably some nerd that's trying to be a little bit edgy, saying, look, I'll fly my drone over the stadium. I don't give a shit. And I feel like the NFL's got the technology to eventually catch these people, so I hope they do.
I don't see a problem with drones just yet, Mike. If they're carrying some C4 and want to drop it into the stadium, yeah, I think we need to look after them. But just getting a nice little aerial shot of a very cool game, a kickoff, or the flyover, different things like that, Mike. Like, what else do you have those drones for?
Well, yeah, like
I'd rather than
how do
being
you stop
over
the possibility of
stadium.
that happening without stopping it happening? Period. Like, I like drone use as far as game broadcast, Brandon. We saw the USFL make use of that in a way that was pretty cool, using them for the angles behind quarterbacks. It's one thing when you're those, but you can't just have random people with their... It'd be like having no stadium security in a stadium and just letting people operate however they wanted and hoping they were all...
I am weary of drones. I know we should be weary of drones, but when it comes to the NFL, I'm not. I don't. Until a player gets shot by a drone, I think I'm okay with it.
All right, go back to the top. Go back to the top 5 before you incriminate yourself on here. Run screaming away from this. I'm going to be a good teammate and save you from yourself. What's number 3 on your top 5?
The cream in the middle of my NFL top 5 from week 3 is Jalen Hurts, Mike. Starting quarterback for the undefeated Philadelphia Eagles. Jalen Hurts has 1,083 yards, most ever by Eagles quarterback in team history through the first 3 games of the season. I love this so much, but what I love even more than that is Nick Sirianni using social media to gas up the Eagles teammates that were going to play Carson Wentz. Did you see this story, Mike?
No.
Basically, I don't know if you've seen it on social media, but there's the Kobe clip that's floating around about the Redeem team when it was LeBron and D Wade and Chris Bosh and everybody was on that team, and they were in the Olympics, and they were about to play Spain. Spain was supposed to be the biggest team in the Olympics at that time, and Kobe said, "I know Paul Gasol is my teammate. I know it's my brother. I'm gonna run through his effing chest." Right? And then everybody's like, oh, LeBron, this is the documentary clip. It's like, oh, no, he ain't going to do that. And then he runs through his chest to let his teammates know and let everyone on Spain know and let Paul Gasol know that he wasn't playing, that he was going to come after the jugular for his former teammate because now they're not teammates. And the fact that Nick Sirianni used this, like, minute-long clip that was just floating around social media and use it as a teaching moment for the Eagles going up against Carson Wentz. I absolutely love it because we all live in the same crazy cycle of just clips and media floating around, and football coaches will football coach whatever they see and turn it into just like bulletin board material, which I just love. Loose lips, sink ships, all that type of things. It just feels very football-y, and I think Kobe for being a part of Philly's demise once again. Or not Philly's demise, it was Carson Wentz. I was tying Philly's demise to Carson Wentz, but
Nick Sirianni seems like a uniquely Philly guy. We learn that more and more as he spends more time around that city. Very appropriate coach for the city that he is in. Number 3 on the bottom 5 for me, Brandon, the Chargers in injury hell. This team remains cursed. Mina Kimes said that the Chargers job looks great until you realize that it's like buying a house that someone was murdered in, and we have seen that show up already in this season. We have Justin Herbert dealing with fractured rib cartilage. We have All-Pro center Corey Linsley dealing with a knee injury, what will hopefully get him back out there soon. But we got the news after this weekend. All-Pro left tackle Rashawn Slater has a torn bicep and will be expected to miss the rest of the season, according to the NFL Network's Tom Pelissero. You've got Keenan Allen with a hamstring injury who's been missing time. Joey Bosa went down with a groin injury in this last game. And J.C. Jackson's still dealing with the complications from an ankle surgery. It's gone bad in a hurry around there, Brandon, and it makes me really sad because all I've ever wanted is to see a fully healthy Chargers team be able to go out and realize the hopes and dreams we had in the preseason for them.
I'm with you, Mike, but I would say there's something about that game last week, and it may have been the fact that they were losing to the Jags at home, but it was the powder blue, Mike. I was like, there's a reason why I never consider them to be contenders, and it's their jerseys.
Because the jerseys are too good.
They're not menacing enough.
They're the best jerseys in the NFL.
Okay, they can be very like what was his name? Not Versace, the guy who was very
Gucci Man.
I think it was Versace who I'm talking about. Basically, you can have very flashy, great outfits, but it doesn't mean that they're functional. And I hate to break it down to the jersey because it's very dumb commentary, but I just don't believe until the Chargers change their jerseys, they're not going to win anything.
It's not dumb commentary. You're just wrong because the jerseys are one of the best things about that team. But it's okay. You're allowed to be wrong about some things, and you're wrong about this one. What's number 2 on your top 5?
Top 5 NFL is Doug Peterson. Speaking of the Jacksonville Jaguars, they finished last in the division since 2016, 2017. They haven't won more than 3 games in the last few seasons. Now they're 1 win away of doing that, led by Doug Peterson. And he's got Trevor Lawrence to finally look like the best quarterback of that crop that came out from 2021. Obviously, you guys remember that in the first round. It was Trey Lance, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, and Trevor Lawrence being the number 1 taken. But through 3 games, he has 262 yards passing, 3 touchdowns, sacked twice, 0 interceptions, which is the biggest part for me, and 71.8% completion percentage. The Jacksonville Jaguars look real, and I think Doug Peterson has a lot to do with it.
He's been great. He's been everything we hoped he would be for that team, for that organization, but most importantly for the guy you mentioned, the quarterback, Trevor Lawrence, because he deserves a lot better than what he had been getting. Number 2, on the bottom 5, Brandon, I had the butt punt in the Miami Dolphins game. With a 21-17 lead and just over a minute and a half left in the game, they had been backed up in their own territory. Thomas Morstead, their punter, had to line up 10 yards from the line instead of 15 yards, the way you'd normally see for a punter, and ends up going straight forward and kicking that ball right into the ass of Trent Sherfield for a safety. The up back on that play took a ball and absolutely blasted him in the glutes. I thank God that it did not make it further down there and hit him in the back of the nuts. He would have been puking everywhere on the field. But it makes for one of the more stunning visuals of the weekend and an all-time moment that they get to laugh about because they ended up winning that game.
Yeah, honestly, I was thinking about considering putting that in my top 5 because they won the game. But
it's a real like good low light moment. It's definitely a good thing, but you also punted the ball off someone's ass for a safety. So
yes. Okay, number 1 in NFL's top 5, and I've been trying to put him away from my lips. I don't want to seem like a homer and talk about Lamar Jackson every week because you can if you want to, but I think it's deserving at this point in time. Lamar Jackson this season, per Field Yates, first guest of this podcast ever, first ever guest on this podcast, Field Yates, number one in passing touchdowns, number 1 in passing ratings, tied for 4th for most rushing yards in the NFL. Most games in NFL history with 3+ passing touchdowns and 100 yards rushing. Lamar Jackson has 4 of those games. Lamar Jackson also, over the past 8 days, has 2 of those games of 3 passing touchdowns and 100 yards rushing. And 5 players under him are all tied with 1 for that stat of 5 passing touchdowns and 100 yards rushing. Obviously, it's very weird, but it's something you would see from, the best, most talented dual threat quarterback in the NFL. And as Ryan Clark has made it a mission to make sure that he gets paid, and every time Lamar Jackson steps on the field, he's quote unquote resetting the quarterback market. I'm not necessarily leaning on that because I just want my team to win, but I am so much of a Lamar Jackson fan at this point in time, Mike, that if they don't do right by him, if they can't win a Super Bowl with Lamar Jackson, let him walk and let whoever wants to pay him, pay him.
Yeah, no, it would be dumb for the Ravens to let him go. He's clearly the NFL MVP at this point in the season, which I know doesn't count for the award right now. He looks more than worth the money. He's accomplished it in every way you could possibly want. We talked to Nate Tice about how they're more of a passing offensive now to start this season. He's erased every question you could have about him. Pay him his money, or else it's going to just continue to rack up more debt for you with Baltimore. You could have had him earlier, and instead the price keeps going up. He has been sensational so far. Number 1, Brandon, easy pick here, Jimmy Garoppolo, the new Dan Orlovsky, taking the mantle, the passing of the guard, as Jimmy Garoppolo in the 49ers game over the weekend steps out of the back of the end zone, crushing racism with the back of his foot in the end zone, quite literally, and decides to step into the realm of the gods and take away Dan Orlovsky's scarlet letter of having been the only quarterback to run out of the back of the end zone in an NFL game. Viral moment for the ages. Awesome to see Dan Orlovsky so happy. We talked about it yesterday. Jimmy Z, number 1 in the bottom 5 for this past weekend. Going back out there in relief effort of Trey Lance and immortalizing himself in the process. That is the NFL's top 5, bottom 5. We appreciate you guys, as always, sticking with us through that. But Brandon, it's come to the most important time of the show where I get to ask you, do you know what time it is?
I do, Mike, but damn. A little bit of Monica in my life, a little bit of Erica by my side, a little bit of Rita's all I need, a little bit of Tina's all I see, a little bit of Sandra in the sun, a little bit of Mary all night long, a little bit of Jessica, here I am, a little bit of this, that, and the third. This, that, and the third.
If that don't hit you in the good parts, you're missing all your good parts. Download, subscribe, rate, review. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review wherever you get your podcast. And tell Brandon how much you love Mumbo number this, that, and the third. And Brandon, let's get to this, that, and the third, because this struck me right in the movie good parts yesterday on God's Internet. According to Anwar Richardson, who is a former NFL writer over at Yahoo and covers UT football, that is University of Texas, for OrangeBloods and Rivals.com, Bijan Robinson, the star running back for the Longhorns, said he's been walking around campus in the football facility carrying a football today because he doesn't want to fumble again. Said teammates tried to knock it out. Even a student on campus tried. He held on to it all day. Brandon, I am so happy that kids today are still watching the program. Straight out of the Omar Epps playbook, straight out of what's going on at ESU, clearly still resonating through history.
Mike, I think you're leaning too much on the fact that you do know where things come from. I don't think this child, I don't think that Mr. Robinson here is thinking about the program more. He's thinking about, okay, how do I not fumble? What have I seen in the lexicon? Like, I think the program is so much part of life that he's just imitating life at this point in time.
Listen, I'm just glad that he didn't use the part of that movie to go like lay in the middle of a highway or put his head through the glass window in the back of a car. Oof. That's definitely more positive. For Bijan Robinson, he's also not trying to fumble the bag. He's one of the college athletes who's really hit NIL in the mouth. He's got a Lamborghini deal. And so I'd be trying to do everything in my power to make sure that gravy train keeps rolling too. So if you haven't seen it already, Bijan, I'm sure longtime listener of this podcast, go check out the program. It's the greatest football movie ever made, and it'll continue to cement in your mind why you should carry this football around. Mm-hmm. Brandon, let's get to that. Continuing to stick in the realm of film and television, HBO Max put out their latest teaser trailer for a new series, The Last of Us, which is an adaptation of a really popular video game with multiple portions of that. One that I checked with a very good and a favorite of our close personal friend and friend of the podcast, Katie Nolan, who loves this game. Post-apocalyptic thriller that I will go running, screaming towards, Brandon. It's from the same people, some of the same people that made the Chernobyl miniseries on HBO. It's got a lot of those same themes, feels, and vibes to it, but a post-apocalyptic thriller that up there with movies about aliens and movies about giant fighting robots or monsters, I will always go see. I will give every part of the post-apocalyptic genre some of my time, and this one, based on what people have said about the video game and based on the track record of HBO, seems like it is going to be overwhelmingly worth it.
I hear you, Mike. I think you've sold me on it just a little bit. What sells me even more, obviously, is post-apocalyptic. I like post-apocalyptic animation for some reason. I think that's kind of, you get a chance to get a little bit more crazier with that, a little bit more fun. But this Pedro Pascal guy who jumped on my radar, I think he was in Snowfall is where I first saw him in, and some other things. He just seems, it's like one of those actors that I'll watch whatever he is in. He is starring in this,
yes.
So I will be there.
There we go. Whether it is Pedro Pascal, whether it is Craig Mazin, who is the co-creator and writer of Chernobyl, give it some of your time.
Nick Offerman.
I have a feeling it's going to be great. Nick Offerman's in it?
Nick Offerman's in it.
Oh, wow. Nick Offerman is in it. I didn't even notice him in the trailer, which shows a lot about my reading and listening comprehension. But yeah, even more so reason.
Right.
Nick Offerman, Parks and Rec's very own. Shout out, love, all the above. Brandon, let's get to the third, though. Maybe the biggest story in the world yesterday. Whew. And I say in the world because it involves interplanetary defense.
Wait a minute. Let me set you up. I don't want to close my eyes. I don't want to fall asleep because I'm missing you, baby. And I don't want to miss a thing.
Harry, I love you. If anyone has seen the movie Armageddon, which if you haven't, get out and leave this podcast right now. Go watch that before you come back here and listen to any more of it. NASA and the people in the world of science finally decided to take that movie seriously and think about what to do in the case and in the threat of world annihilation by way of a meteor. And NASA and their double asteroid redirection test, or commonly known by the acronym DART, just yesterday went on and impacted an asteroid, Dimorphos, to demonstrate a viable mitigation technique for protecting the planet from an earthbound asteroid or comet. This, I guess it would be a satellite, spent 10 months flying in space directed by NASA before making contact with the meteor that they had picked out. It was smaller. It was orbiting another larger space rock, neither of which was going to affect Earth. But Brandon, this sumbitch made contact, and they had video and pictures going all the way to the point of impact, and then this room of nerds lost their minds. This had to be the Super Bowl, Christmas, and 4th of July wrapped up in one for these people. I can't imagine, Brandon, because at the end of a long football season, when you're finally done, and win, lose, or draw, fans are always wearing the loss for a long time. After the national championship, we got our asses whooped at Notre Dame. I can promise you I went and got so rip-roaring drunk at the party that they had set up for us because win or lose, we were still done with one of the hardest seasons I've been a part of, and we were going to blow off some steam. I can't imagine what 10 months of staring at a screen, praying that so many things out of your control go right in space, so you can go and show not the U.S., not North America, but the world, that if shit ever starts to hit the fan, we're going to have Harry Stamper and a bunch of oil drillers on standby to go drop a nuke on this thing. But in the meantime, we think we might be able to hit it with a bird and drop it out of the sky.
Mark, I love it and hate it all at the same time. Like, I feel like we're bullying the asteroid. Like, we need to mind our business a little bit. Like, I think,
do you remember what asteroids did to dinosaurs?
I don't. I've been told and lied to by white people my whole life, and I think that's one of them. So I will get to the dinosaurs later. But
all right, Kyrie.
But for this thing, to see all those people who worked at Best Buy so excited that they finally made impact on this asteroid, Mike, I really don't know what to think. I really don't know what to think about this. I'm excited that the nerds are excited because usually when the nerds are excited, my life is better. There's a little bit longevity to it. With the technology nowadays, you never know what they can do, what they cook up. But yes, I'm glad the dart works. I'm worried about, Mike, if this is conspiracy theory, Brand. This may be tinfoil hat, Brandon, but I'm worried about maybe what if one of these other planets and one of these other galaxies just sees, B36 or whatever the planet is called in their world, and is like, oh, let's see if we can shoot. Let's see if we can just, what do they call it?
Redirect.
Planetary defense. Like, what do you just... Let's see if we can move this shit real quick and blow it up. Mitigate.
Yeah, it's to try and see if they can move it off of its course to make sure that it doesn't crash into our planet. Okay,
so there could be a mitigating technique for Earth from one of these other planets, and I would hope that would leave us alone and just like maybe shoot Mars instead of us. So like I'm thinking about the other planets at the same time, Mike.
You're thinking about the tempo that we've set for the rest of the galaxy or the universe on this front. Brandon, yeah. I think it's worth the risk. Again, we so very clearly scouted the target we were going to hit, knowing it was small, there was no life on it, there was nothing that we were going to do or harm. I feel like most other places that are capable of this probably going to be in the same boat. And honestly, it's not a conspiracy. My only thought process is, I'm glad that these NASA people have figured out a cool way to do this because we have Armageddon behind this and because we're launching something into something else that seems cool as a planetary defense system. I would like some people to take more seriously the thought of protecting the planet that we're on from us and from the things that we're doing down here. Man. It would be nice to have a planet to save and protect from the things that... This is sort of like the calls coming from inside the house situation when it comes to what's affecting Earth. Like, asteroids, sure, I'm glad. And I'm glad that NASA has this one covered, but... we need some help with the other stuff that's going on down here, Mike, and finding better ways to get that information to people because they're clearly not internalizing it enough.
Mike, let me be woke, brother, real quick. How many millions of dollars y'all spent on jet fuel scouting out small asteroids to shoot like a damn water pistol that don't mean no difference to us? Like, I'm sorry. I almost said Tom Brady. Brett Favre already stealing from the poor in his own damn neighborhood. NASA, how about y'all? Florida needs y'all help. Spend some of them millions on some Lunchables and spread them out to the needy homes in Duval County. I'm with you,
or
Mike.
Figure out how to live on one of these other planets because we may need that option sooner than deflecting an asteroid. That being said, I'm going to be really sad if I'm going to be really sad if the asteroid ever comes and we don't have Rockhound and the rest of the crew of like roughneck oil drillers going up there and getting to try and seal the fate of the universe. I would hope that NASA also has that program ready to go.
I don't want to poke holes in this thing, Mike, but the fact that we went and pushed over a little kid with glasses holding his books and his binder and his Pokemon cards doesn't mean that we're ready for the actual Goliath meteor. Is that fair to say? Just because we shot the little thing doesn't mean we're prepared for the big one.
It's like when people test things out on mice, though, you've got to start small and then figure out how to scale it. To your point, because you don't want to waste a ton of money trying to do this at a level that might actually be the one that we're working on here. Maybe they're trying to do right by that. Anyway, conspiracies aside, it was just really cool to watch and see. These nerds genuinely seem very excited. Scientists, engineers, all working towards the greater good in a way that seems to transcend some of the bullshit we deal with down here. So congrats. I hope you nerds are somewhere getting so drunk and photocopying pictures of your ass. I hope it looks like the movie Office Christmas Party where you're slinging from chandeliers and stuff. It just, obviously, y'all get home safe and get started on the next project that's going to change the world, unlike the dumb shit that we do here, but they've earned a special night of nerd fun wherever it comes from and however it looks. So, congratulations to them on that journey. Congratulations to you on the journey, not to the ends of space, but to the ends of this podcast. If you liked it, as always, we'd appreciate you downloading, subscribing, rating, and reviewing, turning on that automatic download thing to help us out with some of those numbers. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review, and then go check out the DraftKings YouTube channel. Subscribe to that and go look at our playlist, GoJo with Mike Golick Jr. under there, and throw us a bunch of those like buttons on there, because every bit of this helps. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.